I love JRPGs, and chances are, if you clicked on this video, you do too. We all have our favorite series or game that we gravitate towards, but the thing is, there's a lot of JRPGs that tend to be overlooked in favor of heavy-hitting games like Final Fantasy, Chrono Trigger, or some of the Dragon Quest games, for example. There's so much more out there than maybe you realize. So in today's video, I'm joined by some of my favorite content creators to give you guys a list of some JRPGs that could use just a little bit more love. And as always, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Leave a comment down below and let me know what your underrated JRPG pick is. Up first, we're joined by Alex from BacklogBattle, giving us a look at a sci-fi inspired visual novel. Check it out.
What's up, everyone? Alex here, and I am from BacklogBattle, where I'm trying to level up the fun in video games by talking about all sorts of JRPGs, Japanese games, and more. Now, on to one of my favorite JRPGs released in recent memory, which is 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim. 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim is described by many people as a mix of a tower defense game and visual novel. And while I kind of agree with this, I loathe to call it a visual novel because it actually has a lot of classic point-and-click adventure elements, similar to games like Monkey Island or King's Quest, but done in a streamlined way. The tower defense portion of the game is actually akin to something like a classic tactical RPG mixed with real-time elements that are similar to Final Fantasy's ATB system, which actually makes it a bit more manageable. Now, you're probably curious about the story, and I will tell you now that when you first boot up 13 Sentinels, it's going to confuse the heck out of you because it tells its story in a non-linear way. But what's really cool about this is that it kind of puts you in the role of an investigative reporter in a sense, in that you get all these pieces of information, and the more you play the game, the more you're unraveling the timeline and understanding the sequence of events that's unfolding. And mind you, that is such an almost impossible feat to do, but 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim does it in such a graceful manner that by the end of the game, all of your questions are practically answered in a clean way. That is what makes this game truly amazing, and I hope you get a chance to play it. Thanks again for having me, Eric, and if you enjoyed this part of the video, please head on over to youtube.com/backlogbattle and hit that subscribe button. Bye, guys!
Next up is missmandia taking things on the go with a tactical RPG on the Nintendo DS.
Hey everyone, missmandia here. So the game I've chosen to share with you is a tactical RPG for the Nintendo DS that I think is severely underrated, and that is Luminous Arc 2. Luminous Arc is a series that was originally developed by a company called Image Epoch. Unfortunately, they had a pretty short lifespan, but before they disbanded, they left us with a small but memorable handful of games, including Stellar Glow and Arcrise Fantasia. Luminous Arc 2 was only the third game in their catalogue, but it was a wonderfully crafted one that, in my opinion, sits right on par with some of the other great tactical RPGs on the system. The game is set in the Kingdom of Carnarvon, a land that is inhabited by both humans and witches. The witches play a vital role in keeping the peace in the kingdom, but the townsfolk have a lot of anxieties surrounding their magic. The Queen decided to form an alliance with the Witches Association. Together with the Royal Knights, they're responsible for defending the citizens against mysterious monsters that have started popping up across the kingdom. As the game opens, we learn that one of the most powerful witches has defected from the association and is wreaking havoc against them. At this stage, we don't know her motives, but we do know that she isn't afraid to use her powers against anyone who stands in her way. So that's the setup of the game, and I won't spoil the story obviously, but it goes in some really interesting directions and has some twists that really caught me off guard. As for the gameplay, it's pretty standard for the genre. One of the cool features here is that the main character can receive magical enhancements from each of the witches he's bonded with. The game has a difficulty level that is fairly approachable for newcomers. It was actually my first tactical RPG, and I remember finding it really smooth to get into. In my opinion, it's one of the biggest hidden gems on the DS, and whether you are a newcomer or a fan of the genre, I think it's definitely worth a look.
Have you ever not played a game because of the way that it was marketed? Yeah, me too. And the perfect example of that is in our next entry, presented by the one and only John, aka Chicken Fillets.
Erek's asked me to be on a collaboration. That's fine. but I need to know what game to pick. Better message him. By the way, what games have been taken so far?
Just resubmit the Harvestella clip.
It looks like I'm turning into the Harvestella guy instead of the Final Fantasy VII guy. Anyway. Hello, John, aka Chickenfillets here, and thank you to the one and only Erek lad for having me on this underrated JRPG collaborations. Now remember, if it ain't lad, it's probably bad. Now a game that isn't bad and is completely underrated, it's Harvestella, and it's from Square Enix. Now, let me tell you a little fact here. Square Enix marketed this game as a farming sim game. That is not the case. This is an action JRPG through and through. But why is it underrated? Well, I'll tell you for a fact. The story of this is a sci-fi epic. Something which really should have been highlighted in the marketing strategy from Square Enix. The actual combat is a joy to play. Now, your character has access to jobs whilst in combat. So for example, you could be in a fighter class using your sword going swoosh swoosh swoosh, and then you might need a bit of magic on your side, so you can switch to a mage and you can just fire enemies with, well, fire. The cast of characters are completely lovable here, and you will just be engrossed with everything about this world. Now yes, there is some farming elements in it, but there is a reason for this. The farming helps you craft items for your journey, and it's honestly doesn't take that much time into the game. The soundtrack for this game is also stellar, and you will want to listen to this soundtrack over and over and over and over and over and over. You get my point. Harvestella is a completely underrated gem, and I've said this many times. I am becoming the Harvestella guy. I should really be the Final Fantasy VII guy, but yeah, Harvestella, you need to play this right now. Anyway, thank you once again to Erek Laddington-Smythe for having me on this JRPG collaboration. And yes, this collaboration video has been sponsored by energy drinks. You could tell I've had too much this time. This has been John, aka Chickenfillets, and until next time, tatty bye.
Before we get to the next game, I want to let you guys know that a whopping 98.5% of the people that are watching videos on my channel are not currently subscribed. Yes, that is an absolutely huge number. So if you want to make a difference and support a smaller content creator like me, please consider hitting that subscribe button. And not only that, please consider hitting the subscribe button to everybody else who's featured in this video today. It really does make a difference. Next up, we have femtrooper's Pick, which is an action RPG take on one of my favorite animes of all time.
Hey everybody, it's femtrooper, and thank you Erek lad for having me on. This is very exciting because I have an underrated JRPG that I want to talk about because no one ever talks about it. It's never on any lists, and it's actually a really good game, and that game is Dragon Ball Z Kakarot. So full disclaimer, this game introduced me to Dragon Ball Z. Yes, I know I'm late to the party, but I used this game as a way to get me into the series, which is exactly what you can do if you're like, oh, I've never seen it or I've never read it. You can actually just dive in right here. It's awesome. It's like the entire anime of Dragon Ball Z in a video game, so you're playing out the events from everything. It's really cool. It's all 4 arcs. It's really just a great time. This is a full-blown anime game. It's an action JRPG, so it's not turn-based, but don't let that freak you out. There are difficulty settings, and it's a really solid time because you get to play as several different characters depending on what's going on at that moment in time in the series. It's really cool. I was so blown away by the story of Dragon Ball Z, and this game does a really good job of telling it. So trust me, it's a really neat game, and no one ever talks about this. It got a release, and then, I don't know, it kind of just got swept under the rug. But I love it. I hold this as one of my favorite games of all time, one of my favorite Switch games. It's on tons of consoles, so you don't just have to play it for Switch. It's on everything, and it's like gorgeous. This is cel-shaded, beautiful anime goodness. I love it. It's all the voice acting from the anime. I played it in Japanese, and I just fell in love with it, and it really kind of felt like you were watching an anime the whole time. Like every time you would, go to a different segment, it really just felt like, oh, like this is a new episode, or this is a new part in the series. It was really exciting. Definitely check this game out. It's really fun, and you don't have to know anything about Dragon Ball Z easy. You can just get into it. And no, it is not just dudes fighting. There is a lot of emotion and heart here, so it's a perfect JRPG. Thanks again for having me on again, Eric. This is really awesome. And remember to come check out my channel where I talk about lots of video game stuff, JRPGs, and goofy games like Dragon Ball Z Kakarot. So hope to see you there.
There's a lot of games that actually never made it out of Japan with official translations. So David Vink is here to tell us what might just be your next must-play title, because I think it looks really cool.
Hi there, everybody. This is David from the channel David Vinc, and thank you so much, Eric Ladd, for having me on to talk about some underrated JRPGs. I am personally a huge fan of the translation scene, and there were some absolute gems that just never hit our shores, and one among them is called God. Growth and Devolution, heed the call to awaken. Here we have a fantastic Earthbound-inspired fan-translated JRPG which takes place in modern-day Earth after an alien attack destroys the planet. Think Earthbound, but if Gigas actually won. You first traverse Japan, then Asia, then eventually the rest of the world opens before you. Besides the underage sex and then dying in pregnancy, there's probably another reason why this game wasn't released in the West, and that's their depiction of America in the game. It is not pleasant, to say the least. While the rest of the world is suffering under alien rule and subjugation, barely subsisting and living in underground bunkers resisting their alien overlords, the Americans are flourishing because they decided to just screw over the rest of the world and sign a peace treaty with them. Once you do traverse the entirety of planet Earth, you then head off to the moon to really put those bastards in their place. This was a smash hit in Japan, even spawning a PlayStation remake, but that one hasn't been translated yet. Thank you again, Eric, for having me on to talk about some underrated JRPGs, and thank you everybody too for listening, and I do hope to see you over on my channel, David Vink, and have a good day.
Ever feel like one of your childhood favorite games doesn't get enough love? Well, making his YouTube debut, yes, I said it, YouTube debut, my friend Quack is here to remind you, don't forget about this N64 classic.
Fellas, Eric Ladd has given me an excellent opportunity to be able to talk about what I think is an underrated RPG. It's Quack here, and I want to talk about Paper Mario. Paper Mario for N64, or as I like to call it, Paper Mario 64. Now, you might be thinking, underrated? I certainly think so. It came out after one of the greatest collaborations of all time, being Super Mario RPG, which just got a Switch remake, and then we also have it coming before The Thousand Year Door, many of which phrase it as the greatest RPG of all time. That's also getting a Switch remake. Where's the Paper Mario 64 remake, Nintendo? That's what I want to know. Paper Mario is the shining star of the Nintendo 64 for me. Outside of Pokemon, it was really the first RPG I ever played. The game has such an interesting party system of just Mario and a partner. Each partner got their own moments in the story, and they all felt very unique. There's some hilarious writing in the game and great character development. I even feel like this is the first time that we really got to see Bowser as a developed character rather than just some big angry Koopa. Well, we got some of that in Super Mario RPG, but I feel like they really fleshed out his character in Paper Mario. Each chapter of the game felt like a unique story, traveling to different areas we had never really explored before. I feel like the environments never overstay their welcome, which allows the game to not grow stale. I also just want to mention the action turn-based combat system, which allows players to follow perfectly timed on-screen commands for an added boost in combat. I feel like that it just made Super Mario RPG's combat system so much better. Now, many games nowadays have replicated this form of combat, even 2023's Sea of Stars, which really replicates this system perfectly. It's always a system that I welcome, as it adds so much, and I'm just not mashing A the entire time. The game also has such a fun soundtrack, and of course, an amazing art style. I mean, what a cool concept for everything to be made out of paper. With all that said, the reason I think Paper Mario 64 is underrated is mostly because it is overshadowed by Super Mario RPG and The Thousand Year Door completely. Thanks again to Eric for giving me the opportunity to be part of this collaboration with so many creators that I've followed for years.
And with our last guest entry, we have Taylor from The Gaming Shelf telling you why this Sega title is a must-play JRPG.
What's going on, everyone? This is Taylor from The Gaming Shelf, and thanks, Eric, for having me on to talk about an underrated JRPG. And anytime I think about underrated JRPGs or hidden gems, there's really only one game that comes to mind, and that is Sakura Wars. And I'm specifically talking about the PS4 Sakura Wars. Now, this game is absolutely incredible and was criminally underrated and underplayed. Essentially, it's a mix between visual novel, dating sim elements, and action combat in a giant mech. I mean, right there, I feel like you're pretty much sold, but let me give you the details. What makes Sakura Wars so good is that in those visual novel segments, you're actually walking around in full 3D and you're talking to these characters and getting to know them, and they all have such distinct personalities, and you get in some really wacky situations, and so it really brings out their personalities in fun ways. And then by the end, you kind of have to pick which girl you want to be with, and there's a really fun ending for each one. But then again, on the flip side, there's these giant mechs that you do combat with, and that's really fun as well. Sometimes you're like hopping over ledges and there's platforming. Other times it's like a battle arena. You're doing these like tournament arc combat sequences that are really fun. In fact, I loved it so much that I ended up getting the platinum trophy, and I don't have too many platinum trophies, so that really says a lot about why I love this game and how good it is. And also the cherry on top is the soundtrack. Now, the way this game plays out is sort of like seasons in an anime. After you finish a chapter, it kind of does a recap and tells you everything that happened, but then it also plays the game's theme song, and it's incredible. You're probably hearing it right now. So between this incredible cast of characters, fun action combat in these giant mechs, and some awesome music, this is definitely an underrated JRPG that you need to play. It was criminally underrated, and I hope you give it a try because I think you'll love it. Thanks again, Eric, for having me on the channel, and I hope to see you guys over on my channel, The Gaming Shelf.
Now, I'm sure you're all wondering, what am I going to pick as my underrated JRPG? Well, it's a game that I only really recently played for the first time. It's a game that never came out in the US, and it's a classic underrated gem from Enix. Any ideas? Well, let's roll the tape. My pick for an underrated JRPG is Terranigma. Terranigma is an action RPG developed by Quintet and published by Enix, obviously now Square Enix, for the Super Nintendo. It was released in Japan back in '95, Europe in '96, but interestingly enough, it never saw a North American release. This is likely due to Enix having closed its US branch by the time localization had finished, and as of now in 2024, it's never been re-released anywhere due to licensing issues. An unfortunate fate for a hidden gem of a game. Terranigma follows the story of a young man named Ark who lives in a small town called Krista. The world is initially portrayed as a place where life and nature are in a state of stagnation. However, after Ark gets a little too curious and opens a box that was hidden in the Elder's basement, everything changes. People turn to stone, and it's up to Ark to set things right, and thus begins his journey. What you do find out early on is that Ark lives in the underworld, and once you reawaken civilizations through exploring the towers of the underworld, you're then sent to the surface of the earth in hopes of restoring what was once lost. What I really like about Terranigma is the sense of isolation that you feel when you start the game, and the story that progresses with you is really well paced. Once you get to the surface and start exploring, it really feels like you are alone in the world. There are remnants of what was left behind, and of course it's up to you to bring it all back, and when you do slowly start to do so, you get new abilities to help you progress in each environment. The gameplay in Terranigma involves solving puzzles, engaging in real-time combat with enemies, and as you progress through the game, you'll travel between different continents, witnessing the evolution of life, civilization, and the struggle between light and darkness. There's a lot more that I could say, but honestly, I'll leave it at that for a story that's best experienced, not knowing much more than this. This game is a true hidden gem in my opinion, and it doesn't get covered enough, and thus is an obvious candidate for underrated JRPG, especially if you grew up in the US like me. Though now I live in Australia, I have actually met a few people here that were aware of Terranigma. It's really cool to experience this game considering I never knew about it until I started getting into retro collecting and JRPGs. I mean, look at the price of the physical cartridge for this game. But for me, I have a reproduction NTSC cartridge, which I can play in my physical Super Nintendo on my Sony Trinitron, the way that I think it's meant to be played, or really looks best anyway. So there you have it, a huge list of underrated JRPG games and JRPG gems. I want to take a second to thank every content creator that participated in the video today. I really appreciate all your efforts in putting these really cool video collections together. I learned so much, and there's so many games that have now gone in my infinitely growing backlog. So thank you so much again for watching today's video. I hope you guys learned about a new game or two. And if you liked the video, please, hey, don't forget to hit like and subscribe already if you haven't done so. Leave a comment down below and let me know what looked interesting out of everything that you saw today. So that's it. We'll leave you to it. Thank you so much for watching again, and we'll see you guys on the next video. Take care and ta-da.